So welcome back to week 4 of the course and the journey and the guide. So what we're going to do before we do anything else is just do a short breathing space. So we'll just be here for a few minutes. So you might like to just close your eyes. And if you've been in a bit of a rush to get here, you can just, in a way, let your body and your thoughts settle. Just getting an overall sense of what's around you. A sense of the chair beneath you, or your cushions, or whatever you're sitting on. And being open to whatever your experience happens to be right now. So if it's unpleasant in some way, just acknowledging that. If it's pleasant, acknowledging that too. If it's just a bit flat, a bit boring, acknowledging that. And just being open to what it is that's going on. And then bringing your attention to your breathing. So actually feeling the way your body moves and the rhythm of your breathing. So gathering yourself around your breathing. And then expanding out again, so having a broader sense of all the sensations of your body. Your emotions, feelings and thoughts. And your surroundings. And just listening to whatever sounds are present. And then opening your eyes and bringing the practice to a close. So this morning, what we're going to do to begin with is slightly different from previous weeks. We're going to start with meditation. So we're going to start by doing the Metta Bhavana. And I'll say a bit more about that just before we do it. Then we're going to have our home groups. We're going to review our practice and try and get a bit of clarity on what happened and anything we might have learned from the previous week. then we'll have a break, and I'm going to introduce our theme for this week, which is the second part of positive emotion, or kusala karma, skillful action, that we began our exploration of last week. And then before we leave, we'll set up our home practice for this coming week. So that's the plan for this week. So I wanted to say a few words about the Metta Bhavana and just make something that's implicit, explicit. So we heard last week about Vedana, this experience that we have of things that we experience being pleasant or unpleasant, or neither strongly one nor the other, so neutral, so-called. So hopefully you've got a bit of a sense of what that means. Sometimes it's a bit of a hard thing to try and isolate what that word Vedana corresponds to in all of the complexity of our experience. But yes, hopefully you've had a chance to sort of reflect on it and identify what it actually is, what Vedana actually is. Because it's not really useful as a concept. It's only useful if we can match the concept up with an element or an aspect of our experience, of our lived experience. And then it becomes like really, really, really useful and powerful as a means of liberating our mind from unhelpful patterns, which is, a big part of what positive emotion is starting to see that there's a pattern there and trying to find a way to loosen the habit, the pattern, and become a bit freer in our mind. So in terms of Vedana, what we've got when we do the Metta Bhavana is we've got these 5 stages, and they actually map onto the different kinds of Vedana. So, in the first stage, what we're doing is first of all, we're just tuning into ourselves, really, and recognizing that we don't like unpleasant Vedana, we like pleasant Vedana. And more than that, we want sort of freedom from having our experience determined by whatever kind of Vedana it is that we're experiencing. So that's when we say, may we be well, may we be happy. We're kind of saying, particularly with may you be well, you could say, may I experience pleasant Vedana. In other words, may my body be well. May I not be ill. May I not be injured. And then when we say, may I be happy, it's a broader thing. It's a deeper thing. In a way, we're wishing a kind of psychological happiness or well-being, which is a sort of deeper level of happiness. When we say, may I be free from suffering, what that freedom consists in is a freedom from having our experience determined by the circumstances that arise in our life. So, for example, having our mind, our experience determined by the Vedana that we experience. So that's the ultimate freedom, really, is when you're not, your experience, your inner experience is not determined by the environment that you happen to be in. And then when we say, may I grow and develop, we're wishing that we move towards those things. So again, we're really emphasizing the developmental, progressive, growthful emphasis of Buddhism. What happens on the second stage is when we bring to mind a friend, it's likely that we'll experience pleasant Vedana. So the fact that they're our friend means we've chosen to be friends with them, probably in large part because we find their company pleasant. There's something about them that we like, that we enjoy. So we'll experience pleasant Vedana. It doesn't always happen as neatly as that, but it's likely that we'll experience pleasant Vedana. And in a way, what we're trying to do is trying to wish that person well for their own sake, not for the sake of our pleasant Vedana, if you see what I mean. So that we're wishing the friend well because they're a human being, not because they're our friend. It's not there's anything wrong with a friendship. It's a wonderful thing, but we're trying to see that they're not just there for us. That's the basic point. Yeah. So it's not just about our pleasant Vedana, that they're a person who exists in their own right. And then with the neutral person stage, which is the next stage we move into, that corresponds to neutral Vedana. So I often think of it as a bit like if you go into a room full of people that you know, and there's some people that you'll light up when you see them. Oh, look, the old so-and-so. There's some people that you might slightly grimace when you see them because you don't like them. And there are other people that you'll notice that they're there in the room. Let's say it's a house party or something. You'll notice that they're there, but you won't have a particular response. You'll neither think, oh, great, or oh, no. You'll just notice that they're there. So that's a neutral person. So yeah, we don't have a particular response. There's no particular Vedana that arises. And in a way, that's what neutral Vedana is. It's where there's neither pleasant nor painful. There's just there's an awareness that there's something there, but it doesn't register. So again, what we're trying to do is, in a way, it's the hardest stage because there isn't much of a response. Is again to try and see that the person exists from their side, to try and imaginatively connect with them. And we can do that really on the basis of what I was just talking about in terms of the first stage. You know, we know that they've got a body, so therefore they experience pleasure and pain. We know that they've got a mind, therefore they'll experience hope and fear and so on. So that's a way of just working with a neutral person stage. I think it's quite one may be kind of cul-de-sac with the neutral person stage is that you try and create pleasant Vedana. And generally, I think with Metta Bhavana, that's a bit of a trap, is that we think it's all about making nice feelings, but it's really much more about a positive intention, an intention for the well-wishing, an intention of well-wishing towards that person. So it's more of a wish than a feeling. So I think that can be reassuring if you know, nothing feels like much is happening in the Metta Bhavana. So don't worry about that. The point is that the wish, the intention is the main thing that you're trying to cultivate. So that's it. Yeah, just a word about the neutral person stage. And then the difficult person stage is quite clearly it quite clearly corresponds to unpleasant Vedana. So when we bring to mind the difficult person, it's quite likely that we'll experience unpleasant Vedana immediately, actually. And it's quite good just to sit with that and just try to relax into that and not immediately kind of react to it, which I often notice that myself when I do the fourth stage. I bring them to mind and then I immediately get into kind of having an argument with them. Yeah, just what I notice is you just catch that, and try and come back to just the feeling. Just come back to the feeling. So yeah, and then in the fifth stage, in a way, you're sort of expanding out. But whatever stage you're in, it's really important, I think, when you bring the person to mind, including when you're in the first stage, just notice what it's like to do that. Just feel what it feels like, as it were. Notice that the flavor of it before you start kind of trying to do anything to or with the person. Just notice how it feels to have them there. So that's you beginning to notice Vedana more deeply. And like I said last week, I think our most vivid and intense Vedanas will arise in relation to others. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to meditate. So if you want to set yourself up for meditation, and then we'll make a start. So you can forget about everything that's just been said now. I'll remind you as we go through. And what we're going to do to begin with is just come into contact with the immediacy of what's arising in our experience. So what's arising, for example, in the body? So feeling the touch of our body against what we're sitting on. Aware of the feet and the legs. And the sensations in the feet and the legs. So some bits will feel pleasant, some bits will feel unpleasant, much will feel neither one nor the other. There's the pelvis, the buttocks, the genital region, the front, the sides, and the back. Again, feeling the weight of our body pressing down into our cushion from that point. And then bringing our awareness into the lower abdomen with all that soft flesh, soft organs, and notice the influence of our breathing on that part. And there might be a corresponding emotion. Often we feel our emotions right down in our belly. We can breathe into whatever's going on down there. There's our chest. Again, breathing into the chest. The shoulders, the shoulder blades, the armpits. So we're opening to ourself as a living organism with feeling, with responsiveness. What about in the arms and the hands? In the neck and the head and the face. And already we'll notice that there are certain parts of our body which feel good, and maybe other parts which feel not so good, or maybe even painful. A headache, a twinge in the back, or maybe a chronic injury. and just recognizing that we prefer pleasure to pain. It's natural and good. And we say, may I be well. And then moving to the next phrase, may I be happy. So if you don't feel happy, that's okay. If you do feel happy, that's good too. So you're just wishing yourself happiness from wherever you happen to be. Recognizing, acknowledging, almost witnessing that deep desire that we have for happiness, for fulfillment. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering. May I grow and develop. And then bringing to mind a good friend of yours. We're moving into the second stage of the Metta Bhavana. And really allowing your attention to sort of move out towards that person in whatever way feels natural to you. You're trying to get a vivid sense of them, of their particular character, their personality, their qualities. And just notice how it feels to do that. Don't worry if it's not what you expect. Don't worry if it's unpleasant. Just being open to what it actually is, what the actual Vedana is. It might be nothing much. So noticing that. So that person exists from their own side. They're not just someone who's pleasant for us. There's way more going on with and for them than their friendship with us, however important that may be. They have a body. So we can say May you be well. May you be happy. And then letting that person move into the background, your friend. And just tuning in with how you are. So you're not really trying to do anything, but just be open to your body, to your heart, to your belly. So with clarity, but also with warmth. And then bring to mind a neutral person. So making sure that you choose somebody and decide to stay with them for the next few minutes. And remembering that nobody will be 100% neutral. And you don't know much about that person, probably, but you do know that they experience pleasure and pain and the whole range of other human experiences. So you say to that person, may you be well. Becoming absorbed in the reality of their life. May you be happy. And then letting go of that person, just letting them move into the background, as it were. And again, just being with yourself, with the sensations of your body, with your thoughts, with your emotional, volitional state. And then bring to mind someone that you find difficult. And how does that feel to do that? What happens in your body? So if there's an unpleasant Vedana there, just seeing if you can relax around it rather than clenching or tensing or resisting. And that person is much more than the cause of your unpleasant Vedana. There's a whole life there. So recognizing and acknowledging that life that expresses itself in terms of a desire and a strategy to achieve well-being, happiness, and freedom. So not getting into the what you think about that strategy, but just focusing on the raw desire, the raw longing that you share with them, and expressing that by saying, "May you be well." May you be happy. So try and let go of any narratives or any arguments and just come back to the raw experience of your life and their life, particularly their life. May you be free from suffering. So then, including in your metta and your well-wishing, the other three people. So there's yourself. So metta for yourself. And the neutral person, and your friend, as well as the difficult person. So may we all be well and happy and free. May we all grow and develop. And then including more people. So you can begin with your friends, and family, and then other people that are in your life. And then just out, extending out, radiating out to all living beings. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. May they all grow. May we all grow and develop. And then moving into a period of just sitting. So letting go of focus and just completely open out. So rather than metta being something that you're creating, metta is something that you're in. So just ending the meditation in your own way. So we'll head into our breakout rooms now. So I'll just remind you what we did last week. So the homework for last week, the home practice for last week was first of all the mindful walk, the breathing space, the mindful meal, and to concentrate on feeling tone, to concentrate on trying to identify the pleasantness, the painfulness, or the neutralness of what it is that's going on. Second thing was to write down 5 things that you were grateful for. The third thing was to do one generous thing each day. And then the other thing was the meditation. So those were the things for last week. The mindful walk, or the breathing space, or the mindful meal. Secondly, 5 things you were grateful for. Thirdly, doing one generous thing each day, and the meditation. So I don't know, Daniel, if you can make me the host, or I just want to share a screen here. Or make me a co-host or something. Thanks. So the questions really is the same as last week. So just being clear about what you took on to practice. So part of what we're trying to do with this review is just be really clear about what it is that we're intending to do. And then when we're really clear about it, we can determine whether we did it or not. So I think that's quite important. Otherwise, one of the things that we're trying to work against is vagueness, of sort of having a vague intention to do something vaguely important, but not really making it specific enough to know whether or not we did it or not. So that's why reviewing, like, what was it that we actually intended to do. It can be also why it's valuable to have a journal to write things down, and it's also why it's valuable to tell somebody else, because you're more likely to remember. And then secondly, what was beneficial? So what did you notice that helped you, or that opened things out for you? What was challenging about it? So again, if we can identify what the challenges are, we can begin to troubleshoot a bit. We can begin to identify, well, whether it's just something we need to put more effort into, or whether there's some kind of problem that we need to solve. And then fourthly, how could you deepen your practice in the week ahead? So, things like the meditation in particular, and the 5 things that you're grateful for, that will continue into the next week of practice. So it'd be good to, just think about what could you do in this coming week to deepen your practice. So those are the four things. Really, you can talk about whatever feels relevant, but that's just to help you get going if you need something to get you going. So Daniel, if you could set the groups and
yeah, it's done.
It's done, is it?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Okay, so we'll make a start. Let me see. Yeah, so we'll make a start. So you've got some great questions. I've got a question. Hi, Nyanadar. I'm noticing resistance, when I'm doing my practice, especially during metta. I really have a restless feeling in my body. Can you comment upon this? Yeah, I can comment. Yeah, in a way, you could say resistance it was an example often of unpleasant Vedana. So it can be an attitudinal thing as well. So often if there's discomfort, often what we're trying to do in the practice is just soften into that discomfort, open out to that discomfort. So in a way, that's what we're trying to learn with Metta Bhavana. You could say, generally speaking, what Metta Bhavana is teaching us to do is to respond to everything that happens with kindness, to respond to pleasant things with kindness, to respond to neutral things with kindness, and to respond to difficult things with kindness. Just to keep being open is one way you could put it. And so it's really important that we recognize that it makes us much more resourceful, that we're going to be much stronger through Metta Bhavana practice. I think it's important because sometimes it can sound as if you're just laying yourself open to attack, and in a way you're not really doing that. What you're doing is you're learning how to respond to difficulty with openness. So I wouldn't worry if you feel resistance when you're doing the meditation. In a way, that's good because it's doing something. You're finding the kind of boundary of your kind of kindness, I suppose you could say, and you're trying to, in a way, open it beyond that, or extend it beyond that. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. Actually, it's more a matter of how you respond to it. Somebody else has said, oh yeah, in our group, someone brought up about deep emotions coming up during metta practice. Perhaps you can give some advice. So again, I mean, like metta is a deep thing. Like our desire for well-being is a deep thing. It's the deepest thing, actually, I would say. So when you start entering into Metta Bhavana, you start unlocking some very, very deep responses and impulses and desires. So it's not surprising that, in a way, it's good if deep things come up, if deep emotions come up. And again, the Metta Bhavana provides a kind of a context in which we can experience those deep emotions in a way that helps them to liberate, you could say, to become or, you know, to use the language of the course, to move from negative emotion to positive emotion. But first of all, we just need to allow in what's there, to sort of speak kind of quite broadly. And then someone else is saying, can the difficult person in Metta also be someone you love? For example, your mother. May as well be honest, it's my ma'am. So absolutely. Usually I would say the people that are in your difficult person will be people who are closest to you, because those are the people you'll have the most strongest response to. So again, absolutely, I would say. Yeah, so try and in a way, be creative with the practice. If you're not sure, just try something out. Particularly if you've been practicing Metta Bhavana for a while, don't be kind of hidebound by being rigidly confined to the structure. You can play with it a bit, and trying to see how you can make the practice relevant to the particular circumstances that you find in your life. You know, if there's a person that you're having difficulty with, or if there's a person that you love who's having difficulty, maybe you can't be with them because they live on the other side of the country, for example. I mean, you know, that's one thing about you know, the whole COVID-19 situation, that if you can't be with someone that you'd like to be with because of the lockdown, put them in your Metta Bhavana, and it's amazing how you'll feel closer to them because you're wishing them well in your meditation. And someone's saying, change the habit of what we dwell on. Can you talk a bit more about how we might do this? So again, this comes right to the heart of what Buddhist practice is about. Is we're in this kind of pattern, we're in this habit. It's often spoken of traditionally as being like a wheel. It's like we're a hamster running around a wheel, and we just repeat the same pattern over and over again. It's like, I think in Maitreya Bandhu's book, he talks about having a YouTube channel, which is our mind. We keep choosing the same videos, playing over and over again. So how we change that is just moment by moment, noticing that we're doing it. Every time we notice that we're in a habit, it weakens the impulse to do it, particularly if we don't perpetuate it. So in a way, that's what you could say that what Kusala Karma is about, what positive emotion is about, this stage. You know, in the first stage of integration, we're just taking ownership of what our life is. We're acknowledging and realizing who we are and what we are. And then in the positive emotion stage, we're beginning to to kind of steer that, as it were. It's a metaphor, but we kind of steer it. That involves just moment by moment redirecting our mind. It's not one big thing. It's lots of very small actions, moment by moment, changing the kind of course of our mind. Someone once used the metaphor of an ocean liner. So if you're in a huge big boat, a huge big, you know, liner, if you want to change direction, it has to happen very, very gradually. You can't just, you know, do a right angle turn. So that's yeah, that's like our mind. So we're in the habit of being in a particular way, and we've just got to make the effort, and the movement happens incrementally. And the Metta Bhavana is a really, really good way of practicing doing that, of practicing responding with kindness to people. I mean, that's really what you're doing. So it's incremental. So that's why often you might not feel that different afterwards. But the long-term effect of doing it is very powerful. Someone's saying, could you say something about the benefits of journaling and the practice of free writing in the morning? How might we fit this into the course? So the kind of journaling I'm talking, there's different kinds of journaling, I suppose. I mean, you know, I think part of the point of self-expression, you could say, is getting what's internal external. So you could say that's a part of the process of integration. So just, I mean, we had that poem from Seamus Heaney, didn't we, a few weeks ago? You know, I rhyme to see myself, to set the darkness echoing. So it's a bit like the writing process is a way of externalizing what's internal, and then you can see it a bit more clearly. When you can put some shape on it. That's part of the difficulty with our mind and our thoughts. They're so slippery. So often it requires communication in order to clarify. So you might notice yourself, I often find this, that it's not until I'm talking to a friend that I begin to, about something that's going on, that I begin to understand what's going on. But if it stays in the confines of my own mind, I can't clarify it. So that's one advantage of journaling, is just externalizing what's internal. I've got one friend that's worth noting. I don't want to privilege or overemphasize words and literature and writing and so on. I've got a friend too. She's an artist, and she's got a little journal. But after she meditates, she draws. She does little sketches with watercolor and stuff, and that's the way she explores her meditation. Very, very creative. So hopefully that gives you some, Anthea, that gives you a sense of something that's useful. And then there's a question from Michael. Hi, Nyanadara. You mentioned about attaining the ultimate freedom of your inner life not being determined by external Vedana. It piqued my interest. Can you say something more about this? So the Buddha is called the Arahant, the free. And it's usually described traditionally as being free from negative mental states. So if you're in a negative mental state, if there's craving or hatred or ignorance present, what happens is when something happens to us, we react. So it's as if our internal experience and our actions are determined by what stimulates us. So in other words, if somebody does something that we really don't like, we get really pissed off. So that person's action of doing something we don't like determines our action. So we're not free, in other words. So we're free when somebody can do something that we don't like and we don't react. We just recognize, oh, that's unpleasant Vedana. So that's the kind of freedom that the Buddha inhabits, that he just recognizes the reality of what's happening and responds. He doesn't react. So that's freedom. So that's the ultimate freedom, is you're genuinely creative in that sense, that you're not like a machine that's just set in motion when a particular stimulus comes into being. And again, that's what we're trying to do in the stage of positive emotion, is move our mind in that direction, from reactivity to responsiveness, you could say. Hopefully that answers your question. And then there's one other one there. Oh yeah. How do you, with regard to Metta Bhavana, how do you square wishing oneself or others to be happy whilst wishing for freedom from influence of Vedana? So this is an important distinction that's made in Buddhism between Vedana, which is what happens to us, and then emotion or volition or intention, which is what we do with what happens to us. So this is the area that we're working with the Metta Bhavana. So when somebody does something that we like or dislike or we're neutral to, that we experience a Vedana. And immediately what happens is we react to it, usually. So if it's something that we like, we grab hold of it. And it's almost like we spoil it by grasping onto it. So this is in a way is what I wanted to talk about. I'll pick that up in a moment. But that's the basic. So there's no. So what you're doing with a Metta Bhavana is, first of all, you bring into mind the person, and you're just noticing what it feels like, and then you're holding that feeling with your intention to wish them well. That's the basic. So so you're doing, in a way, you're kind of doing two things, but really it's an opening. It's an opening to them as existing independent of how you feel. So you feel all kinds of things about other people, but they exist. They experience pleasure and pain, irrespective of what you experience, and you're trying to remember that. Usually, what we do is we just bring everything back to ourselves. What does this mean for me? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to ask the question, what does this mean for the other person? Now, hopefully that answers the question. Another question. You mentioned the importance of asking questions and keeping curious. Any advice on how to prevent it going into a train of thought away from the actual experience? That's a good question. Well, I suppose the answer to that is we'll keep paying attention to your actual experience. And again, in the book, Maitreya Banu's got this passage where he talks about thinking from things and into things. Often our thinking just becomes it comes adrift from what's set in motion. So we're trying to keep coming back to like, what are we thinking from? and then it's likely not to get kind of so cut off. And I think this is one of the things we need to learn, is we need to learn to distinguish between when we're getting into prapancha, mental proliferation, and when we're thinking creatively. So there's nothing wrong with thinking. I think that's really important that we understand that. Like, thinking is amazing. I mean, you know, thinking is how human beings develop. I mean, if we couldn't think, we couldn't communicate. But it's what happens is our thinking can become kind of toxic. And what we're trying to do, again, this is a lot of what this week is about, what positive emotion, or these weeks are about, is trying to develop the discernment between when our thinking is unhelpful and when it's helpful. Simple as that. Is this reactive thinking, or is this creative thinking? Is this skillful thinking, or is this unskillful thinking? Is this helpful, or is this unhelpful? And just noticing that, and knowing that for yourself. Oh, this is helpful, or this is unhelpful. That can make all the difference. And then someone says, in bringing up deep emotions, can this also occur outside of practice? Also, absolutely, it can. And again, that's part of what we're trying to do with mindfulness more broadly, and positive emotion more broadly. So integration and positive emotion is noticing how we respond to life. You know, so noticing when we hear Leo Varadkar giving the latest announcement about the easing of the lockdown, noticing how we respond to that. Do we get pissed off? Do we feel hopeful? Do we feel depressed? Just noticing that, knowing what our responses are, because only when we start knowing that we can begin to be more creative. We have to start by actually knowing what's going on. Again, this is where journaling can help. Are the poems you read in the book? Well, if they're not in the book, I've been emailing them to you. At least I try to. I think I have so far. I think there are different levels of dislike we can have for a person. That's certainly true. There's a big difference when it's someone who annoys you and someone who has caused you serious harm. Do we welcome both types of people into Metta Bhavana? So the short answer is yes. There's a whole spectrum of, like you say, someone who's a bit annoying and someone who's actually actively harming you. Now, the Buddha's teaching is that you should include everybody in your Metta Bhavana. And actually, your enemy is your greatest teacher. That's some Buddhist traditions say. But I think if you're only new at Metta Bhavana, it's not a good idea to pick somebody who's so difficult that it kind of derails your practice. So I think sometimes it's good to sort of leave people in the wings, as it were, to respond to it at a later time. Can you say more on Michael's point via the internal not being affected by the external? How might that be in the context of what is going on in America? We see such external oppression. It feels like not having a strong emotion is being selfish or part of the problem. I'm not sure if that is clear. And I'm glad you asked that. If metta is there, then you'll have a powerful desire to benefit other people. So that's what metta is. It's a powerful desire for the well-being of others. So you will want to change the world if metta is present. But very often what happens is the desire to change the world is motivated by a negative emotion. It's just anger. It's just, I don't want to see this happen. And then you apportion blame to certain people, and you try and take power away from them because you feel they've got power over you, which often makes the situation worse. So that's why, so freedom is not only freedom from having your behavior determined by what you encounter, but it's freedom to respond genuinely creatively and genuinely helpfully. So that's a kind of freedom as well. So the Buddha, he had that the freedom, his behavior wasn't determined by negative mental states. And he spent his entire life after he was enlightened trying to communicate this path of freedom to others in order to benefit the world. He said to his first 60 disciples, he said, you are now free, you are now liberated. Now go and wander for the benefit of all beings, for the well-being of the many. So there's this definite altruistic bent that the Dharma has. So I think. So, for example, in America, like often what happens when things kind of flare up because all the resentment comes out and all the frustration comes out. But what really needs to happen is something much more positive, that's based on intelligence, and it's based on reflection, not just on a knee-jerk reaction, which is so often what happens in human communities. Is we get into this collective kind of madness, really. So part of what we're trying to do in the Buddhist community is make a decision as an individual not to participate in that, and to try and participate in something that's genuinely helpful. So thanks for the questions. I quite enjoyed that. It keeps it fresh. It would have been nice to just check in with people about how that was landing. And interestingly, we've kind of covered a lot of what I wanted to talk about in terms of moving on the topic of positive emotion. So I've been talking about, basically about Vedana and how we react with Vedana. And one of the things that we often do is we, whatever's going on, we want pleasure. So this, instead of difficulty, or if we're already experiencing pleasure, we want more pleasure. And we really believe that just getting pleasure will make us happy. And it just reminded me of a photo that we have in the archive here, and it's of a fella whose name was Owen. He's now an order member. He's an Irish guy. He lives in England now, but he's looking at a biscuit like this. He's on a retreat. He's just looking at a biscuit. There's a bite out of the biscuit, and basically it's kind of, you're looking at it in this kind of quizzical kind of way. And I asked him, or somebody asked him about that photograph, and he said he had this moment where this is the biscuit that came out it was a chocolate biscuit that came, quite a nice chocolate biscuit actually, that came out on the last morning of the week-long retreat. And he was really, really looking forward to it. And then when actually he ate it, it was disappointing. It didn't give him the kind of freedom that he was hoping for. It didn't give him the delight that he was hoping for. So he's sort of having this moment of sort of seeing through the limited satisfaction of a chocolate biscuit. So this is often what we get into, is it's like, we fixate on a particular thing that will make everything okay. So it's probably particularly acute for us at the moment because we're starting to look forward to the things that we haven't been able to do for the last, whatever it is, 9 or 10 weeks. So I'd love to have a haircut, for example. And so I can start thinking about that, almost as if getting a haircut will be like the answer to all of my problems. What we need to do, though, in a way, there's nothing wrong with pleasure in itself. It's our attitude to pleasure that can be problematic, because we do need delight in our lives. We need pleasure in our lives. And I think it's really important not to set goodness and pleasure in opposition to each other. So it's as if we can start thinking, well, I can either be good and I can do the right thing, or I can do the enjoyable thing. So what we need to do is we need to find ways where we can experience delight in a way that doesn't have a kind of a kickback, or that doesn't involve doing something maybe slightly ethically dubious. So in other words, trying to find innocent pleasure. So there's a lovely story in the life of the Buddha where he'd been doing these terrible austerities. You might know the story. He basically decided that the way to liberate himself was to sort of subjugate the flesh, as it were. So he didn't eat. He did all sorts of difficult things to his body. He really didn't eat for a lot and was emaciated. And then he remembered this moment from his early life when he was, his father was ploughing the field. They think it's probably some kind of ritual where the leader of the community ploughs the field for the first time. He's just sitting under a tree, and he's just completely relaxed. It's a lovely sunny day. He's sitting under the tree and he just goes into a state of meditative absorption. He goes into jhana. And it's completely innocent. There's nothing, there's no kind of kickback. There's no bad consequences from that. And he remembered that when he was doing these austerities. And he thought, well, there's nothing, I can just enjoy meditative absorption. I don't have to worry about that. There's nothing wrong with that. So he basically abandoned his ascetic practices. He abandoned, mortifying the flesh, and started to live a more of a kind of balanced life. So to come more towards what is known as the middle way. So I think what we need to do in our lives is try to identify what gives us pleasure in our lives that doesn't have that kind of kickback, that's quite innocent. So there's lots of different examples. Like, so actually just, like I mentioned, like walking in a garden, or walking on the beach, or just going for a walk, just getting away from our screens for a moment and just taking in the sunshine, and not so much that at the moment, but we can still take in the greenery, and just enjoying being outside, enjoying nature. There's also like music, just sitting. And actually one thing, I think one thing in our lives, there's often not a lot of space for music, for really not just having it on, but actually really listening to it, sitting down and listening to some music. There's dancing, there's novels, there's all kinds of things. So it's quite good, I think, just to reflect this week. Well, what are your sources of delight? I won't say pleasure, I'll say delight. Where do we kind of play? Because often when we really get into this delight, it's more of a sense of play than a sense of something kind of worthy that we're doing. So if we're going to persist, if we're going to really maintain and develop, a Dharma practice, there has to be delight in it. Otherwise, we'll dry up. So one of the sources of delight I wanted to mention is friendship and community. So this comes up quite strongly this week. And it's a really lovely thing about human life, is that we can develop friendship. It's what in a way makes Metta Bhavana possible, that we can actually feel for another person. It's kind of amazing. Feel for another person for its own sake, rather than feel for another person because of what they can do for us. So this is hugely, like I say, hugely important in human life. And I just wanted to mention, just rather than talking about it kind of in an abstract way, just mention just one person that I made friends with. And part of the reason it came to mind because today, on the 6th of June, 2003, I was ordained. So I was ordained into the Dublin Buddhist Order, which is, why I've got a case of this piece of cloth around my neck and a Sanskrit name and so on. And that took place in the context of a 4-month retreat in Spain. And when I was there with, there was 26 of us, I think, 26 men on that retreat. There's a separate retreat for women that happens in another part of Spain. Anyway, I was with this friend of mine, Arta City. He wasn't Arta City then, he was James. And I actually, we were both living and working in a place called Windhorse Trading in Cambridge, which was a large gifts wholesaler. That's another story. And he lived next door to me, and I kind of knew him a bit, but I didn't actually know him terribly well. But he asked me, would I like to share a room with him in this retreat center up the mountains in Spain. So there's these little huts. They're literally like little kind of stone huts. And we shared a hut for 4 months, from March to August in Spain on this 4-month retreat. And we actually consciously kind of made friends with each other. And, there was quite a lot of mutual interest. We were both into music, for example, both into the Three Jewels, into Buddhism. But we had, quite a bit in common. We're both the same age and so on. He's English, I'm from New Zealand. And with that sort of became the beginning of a friendship, which has lasted until now. And we kind of make an effort, because he lives in England, I have to make an effort, and he needs to make an effort to kind of keep in touch. So we often see each other on big Buddhist gatherings and retreats and so on. But we talk to each other. And I wanted to mention this because a few years ago, or maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, we had a bit of a bust up. So he gave me a little bit of feedback, and I thought his feedback was incorrect. I thought what he was saying about what I was doing was just something I wasn't doing. So I tried to get into kind of communication about that, and I was a bit pissed off. And then he started getting he sort of started backing off because I was getting pissed off. And the more he backed off, the more irritated I got. And we actually kind of ended up having a bit of a bust up. And in a way, it was really good because there was something that he had an attitude towards me and I had an attitude towards him, which was actually just based on old information. Basically, I mean, the gist of it was that I thought he was a bit homophobic, and he thought that I was a bit that I was really kind of politically correct to the point of being oppressive. That was basically it, and we talked it out. I remember sitting in a cafe in Cambridge and just talking it all out. And now we're much better friends than we were, and we've kind of both learned something about ourselves, and we've learned something about each other. So one of the things Maitreya Bandhu says in the book is to make friends and stay friends. And I think we can learn so much, we can develop so much when difficulties happen in friendships or family relationships, and we stay with it and we try and keep that empathy, keep that metta there, and work through that, and then we can really begin to develop. So one of the practice points for this week is to make friends, but also to deepen friendships. So I'm just going to go now into the last bit of actually talking about what our practice is going to consist of this week. So what our home practice will be. Now, just before I go into that, I wanted to make a point about the book. And when I prepared this, I looked at all the different things to practice in the book and I wrote them all down. And I was really struck by just how many different things there were. So there's far too much in the book that anyone could meaningfully practice in a week. So again, what you need to do is choose something to practice. What I'm going to give you is what I think are the main things, but there might be other things you want to do. But whatever you do, just do something. Don't worry about doing everything. You won't be able to do it, and it'll just make you feel kind of defeated, really. And the thing to ask is when you read something in the book, or when I talk and I give you a practice, what has what I'm calling the yes feeling? What is it that when you encounter it, you think, yeah, I could do that? It's a little bit like trying on clothes. Some of you will relate to this, some of you won't relate to it if you're into clothes or not into clothes. But I remember my sister telling me, she gave me some really good advice, my elder sister. She said, when you go to a sale and there's clothing that is cheaper than, maybe a lot cheaper than normal, she said, that's great, but don't buy anything unless it's got the yes feeling. Because unless it's got the yes feeling, you actually won't wear it. And that's so true. I've got so many items of clothing that I kind of think, I kind of need a shirt. I go and that shirt's good value. It's good quality. I put it on. I think, it's all right. And then I never wear it because I actually don't like it. So you want the things that you're undertaking to do to have that kind of yes feeling. You can kind of imagine and really doing it. It sort of feels right. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. You can leave that till later. But just do the things that you think, yeah, I can really imagine doing that. I can see the point of it. And so what are those things? Oops, really? You can just edit that out, Daniel. So this week, so with a mindful walk, the breathing space, the mindful meal, whatever it is that you're doing, just try and notice what state you're in. Try and notice if you're in a skillful, creative mental state or in a reactive, constricted mental state. Just try and know that, as well as, trying to identify Vedana. The two are connected. It's worth continuing the 5 things that you're grateful for. It takes a couple of weeks to kind of get into the rhythm of that. So that might be something. Somebody was asking about journaling. You might like actually to journal that, to actually to write creatively about that rather than just jotting them down if you want to. So, you know, you could pick up gratitude as a kind of theme to explore in writing. And the third thing is what I was just talking about, which is making friends. And I'm aware that at the moment it's a bit more difficult to make friends, although hopefully some of you are making connections through the breakout rooms and the home groups and so on the course. But yeah, making new friends and deepen existing friendships. So one way of doing this is just by saying things that you haven't said. So sharing something about yourself that maybe you haven't shared before. There's a little quote from that poem that I read a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. No, it was last week, which is the surest way of gaining is to give. To learn a secret, tell one of your own. Another way of putting it is, in order to have a friend, you have to be a friend. So what can you give to the other person? What can you sort of volunteer or offer that might bring your friendship deeper? It's actually, at the moment, I think, we're probably coming out of this phase now, but I know a while ago, because I wasn't seeing friends, because I wasn't able to go out in the way that I would normally do, there's a bit more space to get in contact with old friends. So I've got a friend who lives in Montana in America, and he got in touch, and I responded to him just because there's an opportunity for us to talk. We hardly ever get to talk. I never get to see him, but you might find that there's some people that you haven't spoken to for years, and this actually would be a really good opportunity to get in touch. And then, of course, there's the Metta Bhavana. So to continue with the Metta Bhavana and try and reflect on what I was saying there and what we practice there about Vedana, and how Vedana and trying to find creative responses to Vedana is a way of exploring what's going on in Metta Bhavana. So that's basically, those are the different items for this week. So you've got, first of all, you've got the mindful walk, the breathing space, the mindful meal, just to notice what state you're in. Continue with the gratitude list, and then friendship. So making friends and deepening friendships, which might mean getting in touch with people that you haven't been in touch with for a while. And then fourthly, just remembering the meditation, not forgetting about that. So what I'm going to do now is just give you a couple of minutes just to reflect on what you're going to do this week. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll just do a very short little breathing space. So if you just want to put down what you're looking at, if you're looking at something, and just tune into what's going on in terms of your physical experience. What's flowing through your mind? Maybe there's an anticipation of what's coming next. Maybe there's a peak of delight with that anticipation, or maybe even dread. So just notice how you're feeling about what's coming up. And then tuning into your breathing. And then again, expanding out to include an awareness of your body, of your surroundings, of the other people on the Zoom call. Okay, so we'll leave it there for this week. So do read the book, and do remember about the receptivity sections at the end of each chapter with the poem. And if you've got any more questions about anything that we've talked about, do hang on afterwards. I'll be here for another 15 minutes or so. and we can continue on if you've got more questions. But other than that, we'll leave it there. So see you next week.